Good evening. This is Dale M. with Gardner Webb. Today is Wednesday, December the 1st. This is our 12th Zoom session. We're continuing with financing and education tonight. We'll get to that in just a minute. Let me do a little housekeeping to begin with. Please remember to continue to work on adding your 21 competencies in your competency folio. Please remember that you only have to put one proof of competency for each of the 21 competencies. The last two, the professional dispositions and the digital learning, you don't have to do. You go through Visionary, I believe it is. You do the 21 competencies. Make sure that you do one for each. Under intern materials, I have examples of where you can find those competency proofs from both your evidence artifact work and from your internship hours. Again, that's on our main menu under intern materials over here, those two documents. You only have to put one round of 21 in, and again, that precludes the meeting at the end with your principal to go over competency. You continuing students do have to have a certification of competency from your principal and one from your clinical coach. The clinical coach will make their competency decisions based on that competency folio, so that's very important. And your principal will make their competency decision on the activities in your 400 hours during your internship. So please remember to go ahead and be working on your competencies. Many of you have already started that. You're doing a great job. Looking at the weekly schedule, you go to New Share. As I said, this is the 12th session, week 12. Again, we continue with financing. Your reading in both the resource management and the principal's guide. In terms of your evidence artifact work, you should be close to wrapping up for the semester. Your two peer reviews of PsyOp-D are due in discussion board, and your PsyOp-A should be in assignment Dropbox, and then next week is PsyOp-B should be in there. And that should end you up all of your evidence artifact work for this semester. Please remember, next week we will cover sexual harassment. Buddy Huckabee did his weekly assignment on policy on harassment. It was excellent. I would highly recommend that you go in. It's not that long. Go in and read Buddy's post in discussion board 15 on sexual harassment. It's excellent. It summarizes it for you and hits the main points that need to be hit. That you need to let law enforcement do their job. You need to inform the right people. You need to take all of them seriously. Buddy did an excellent job. Kudos to Buddy. And then the last week, I will work on interviewing again. I hit up the 4 types of interviews, including the Gallup interviews, the beginning ones. I will work on those with you in week 14. All right, so everybody should know where they are in terms of their evidence artifact work and working on your discussion boards. So let's dive right into, we covered kind of the specifics of finance and developing the school budget and some of those things. Let's look at some of the big picture ideas about financing and education. There's an unpredictable future in public school finance. North Carolina has seen the advent of the lottery to try to do some more state financing. That was in response to the Leandro case back in the 90s. It was decided that case was lost by the low wealth districts. As I previously told you, they sued basically the state and the high wealth district to change the funding formula so that lower wealth districts would get a larger share of state money per pupil than the higher wealth districts who had the ability to pay more locally. I don't think they foresaw that down the road that there'd be a time when there'd be no such thing as a high wealth district where everybody is struggling with the local budget. And that's what's happening now because the state has cut so much out of the budget the locals had to make up. But in the end, the Leandro case, what happened is the education lottery was started, but it doesn't change the funding formula. It just adds some pork barrel money for one-off projects in some counties, and it's been wholly unsuccessful in changing the paradigm of funding whatsoever. Um, so that's where we are in North Carolina, and through the current administration in the governor's office and the folks in the General Assembly have cut over $500 million out of the state budget. It seems that somehow we're in a conundrum. We believe that education is the key to economic growth, but we don't want to fund it, or we say that we believe that it is. Which leads me to the first slide. Some general things that we believe that education will continue to be viewed as a key to economic growth. That doesn't mean that funding will follow that belief. It just believes that we're going to put more on schools with less resources. There's a growing mismatch between the literacy of the labor force and the competency required for the jobs. And I think we saw that, not to get into a political discussion, but we saw that in the last election, where many of the people who don't have the skills to compete in a modern labor force want a return to the industrial age, where we have manufacturing jobs that don't require tremendous literacy. It's yet to be seen if those jobs will come back. Coal, manufacturing, textiles, those kinds of things. So what we've had in American society right now is a rejection of high tech and moving into what we would consider the 21st century in terms of communications and high tech jobs and those things. Our populace, or at least probably half of them, are desirous of a return back to the industrial age. And that, of course, would negate the need for education at a very high level in a broader scope across America. What a lot of folks are looking for a return to jobs that don't require much education, because education is a long and arduous process just to get through K-12, but it's an expensive process once you get past that. A wide spectrum of school finance initiatives and experiments will be undertaken. That's what North Carolina is in right now, experimenting with the lottery, which has been wholly unsatisfactory so far. Regional disparities of educational resources will increase. That's the debate between high wealth and low wealth. As we have discovered this semester, the funds that fund education come from property taxes, both business and residential. And obviously there's disparities in different communities in terms of the wealth and how much taxes, the value of the property, and how much taxes there is to actually get. And so that will continue. That won't change. The number of public school enrollments in the U.S. will increase as we continue to see economic conditions such that folks can't afford private school. We'll see a continuing trend for folks to go to public and charter schools, which charters are public schools. Now that, there will be a push for vouchers for private schools, but still, even if that does come to fruition more, it doesn't. There's a great disparity in North Carolina. Those few vouchers that have been given out are about $3,700 a year, and a good private school is probably 3 or 4 times that. So that still precludes poor people from going to private school. Only 15% of jobs will require diplomas. More than half will require post-secondary education and training. And that's kind of the trend that the populace is trying to reverse by going back to manufacturing, because that more than half that require post-secondary education, that's just too expensive. Undergraduate schools of education across the country are in a real dilemma right now. It doesn't make sense, for example, to go to a private school that costs between $35,000 and $65,000 a year to train for a job that pays $35,000 a year. And that's what's happening now is post-secondary education is so expensive. You have to look at it not as finishing school anymore. You have to look at it as a business decision. How much you're going to invest totally, and how much debt you're going to walk away with, and what will be your ability to recoup that money spent and to pay off that debt. Equity issues will become major problems faced by policy, not just equity between poor and wealthy districts, but equity decisions between charters and public schools, charters, public schools, and private schools, vouchers. All of those things enter into the equity argument. And educational equity will be redefined not in terms of access, but in terms of expenditures. That's what I mean. It's going to include not only the inequities between wealthy and not wealthy districts in terms of public schools, but equity will be redefined as vouchers, charter schools, private schools, and public schools. Equity, the definition of equity will expand beyond wealthy districts and low wealth districts in public education to include charters, privates, vouchers, etc. Now, you say, Dale, why do I need to know this stuff? Because these are issues that you're going to face as school administrators. These are issues that parents are going to engage you in, and community leaders are going to engage you in. You need to be conversant in these issues. Elusive forces educational leaders must consider in determining the educational structure includes analyzing the future in relation to these data. All right. Luke, are you there? I see Luke has just joined us. Anyway, all right. So here are some of the things that are going to be that you're going to have to consider as an educational leader in the future. Demographics, interest rates, tax limitation measurements, federal deficit surplus, risk management, benefits, personnel needs. Now, hey Luke, how are you? Luke, can you hear me yet?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Great, welcome. When we talk about things that you must consider in determining educational structure, one of the things that I'm concerned about going forward in the state of North Carolina is what happens with what we loosely refer to as teacher tenure, but is actually career status. And the proponents of doing away with career status, i.e. tenure, claim that it's in order to get rid of poor teachers. I don't believe that that's a truthful argument.
Right.
We have ways to get rid of poor teachers. The argument that they don't want to enter into, and I think the real reason behind that folks are trying to get rid of career status is to be able to differentiate salary and benefits. Let me explain. Charter schools are already experimenting with this. So if we do away with career status and your job right to salary and benefits, what could happen is, and this is already happening in some charter schools, we could pay less than state rate for full-time teaching faculty who have credentials and certification. What that would mean is right now, if I'm a science teacher and I have my certification and I'm highly qualified, means I'm certified in my field, at any public school in North Carolina, if I go and apply for a job, I have to be paid the state minimum for that level. And if I have advanced degrees, if I was grandfathered in, and I would have to be paid for them in my national boards, and I would have insurance and sick days and annual leave days and all the benefits that would come with that. What some folks would like to see is the ability to differentiate that. So if I showed up and I was a science teacher, I would probably get that because those are high need people. But if Luke showed up and he was a PE teacher, we could legally tell Luke, we'll pay you sub pay. Even though you're a certified teacher, highly qualified PE, PE teachers are a dime a dozen. We could get somebody in to just roll the ball out if we want to. It doesn't even have to be certified. So we're only going to pay you sub pay, which means you make X number a day. You're on an end of year contract, and we don't have to give you any benefits. Now, some charter schools are already experimenting with that, bringing in people who aren't certified. People who teach in areas that aren't high need, they're paying them less than standard already. What happens if career status evaporates in North Carolina is that you will begin to see differentiation among certified staff at public schools. Chemistry teacher makes the max. The art teacher makes the minimum. That's what the career status argument is truly about. It's not about getting rid of bad teachers. It's a way to cut costs, personnel costs, going forward, so that in theory more money could go per pupil into things that kids need. I think that's a spurious argument also. I think what that means is that money would just come out of the budget. It wouldn't go anywhere. Be like in North Carolina when the $500 million came out over the last 4 years. It didn't come back in. It didn't go out one door and come back in another in some other form. It just went out the door. So my suspicion is if we differentiate pay, once career status is gone and we start differentiating pay, that'll just be money that disappears from the state budget. It will not come back in another form back into education.
Where did it go?
Those are issues. Yes, Luke?
Where did it go?
It went into tax breaks for corporate America.
Wow.
We have in this century, we have entered into the era of tax incentives for corporate America.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's standard practice now, if we would like to entice a business to come to our state and bring jobs, that we give them a corporate tax break. I'm in the Western White House tonight. As you can tell from my background, it's not my normal background. I'm a full-time professor at Gardner-Webb, and I'm on campus at Gardner-Webb several days a week, and I have a house here nearby the campus. It's just across the line out of Cleveland County into Rutherford County. And between where I live here and the campus, there is a huge Facebook plant. It's a data farm. It's a server farm. Mm-hmm. Mark Zuckerberg is not there. It's just a few technicians there and some security and maintenance and custodial people. And so the county of Rutherford bought the old mill that was on the site. It was adjacent to the North Carolina data center, and they have a power generating plant of their own there. And so they tore the mill down. The county bought the property, tore the mill down, cleared the land, and gave it to Facebook. That was about a $6 million investment. And Facebook came in and put up a data server facility, but they only have 25 employees. There's only 5 actual technicians, and they commute from Charlotte. But the other people who are there are custodians and security, minimum wage jobs. Not only did they give them the property to build the facility and improve it for them, water, sewer, and all those things, they gave them a 10 years no tax whatsoever, and then I think a graduated tax for several years after that. So in the end, Facebook's investment was just in their building and their equipment. They didn't have to pay for the land, but more importantly, they don't pay any business tax, any corporate, any income or property taxes. Wow. And the county is about to go broke now. So you have to ask, how much value that the county thought that there would be hundreds of jobs there. I mean, if you look at the footprint of the facility, you would say, oh my God, you know, but if you go by the parking lot, not as big as the front drive in most schools. It's got about 30 parking spaces in front. Because that's all, there's just a handful of people who work there. High tech means low number of jobs. So that's one of the things that folks don't understand is when you go high tech, that means that you put robotics and technology in place of labor because it's much cheaper. Many of the big factories, big factory complexes in eastern North Carolina, if you drive by them now, if they are even open, 90% of the parking lot has been fenced off because they don't need all those workers. They have modernized and gone to robotics and technology. They've gone high tech, and it just takes a handful of workers. One of my uncles worked in textiles in Spartanburg, South Carolina, and he invited us down to the grand reopening of the mill that he worked. It's been 30 years ago or more, and they had just modernized, and we were standing there on the floor, the second floor of the Whitney Mill there in Spartanburg, South Carolina, and my uncle said to me that, you know, at one time back in the old days, back in the 50s and 60s when he was working there were over 500 people working on that floor. There were 2 working on that floor after they modernized. Let me say that again. Over 500 to 2. So that's what modernization and high tech means. It means no jobs. So when you bring in these factories and when you bring in these corporate people and you give them incentives to come, millions of dollars in incentives, unfortunately, it's kind of like sports teams. You buy these professional sports teams, you give them incentives or give them their stadium or give them hundreds of millions to improve their stadium. The local economy does not get that money back, unfortunately. And the people, again, who suffer are the schools. And so Luke's question is when they cut that $500 million out of the state budget for education over 4 years, where'd that money go? Well, a lot of that revenue wasn't collected. They gave corporate tax breaks to try to get folks to stay in the state that were already here. So they didn't, you know, they lessened their tax rate, so they collected less, and they gave more incentives for more people to come in. So right now, we're all abuzz across the nation about the Carrier plant in Indiana. You know, preliminary information coming out of it's not been released yet, but what we're hearing is that Carrier was given millions of dollars to stay. I don't know. I mean, that's the current method, but I'm not sure that that's how much value that's going to be. But now I know where those millions are going to come from. You're going to have to cut that somewhere else out of the state budget. And education is usually, you know, the turkey on the carving board. So if I were in public education in Indiana, I'd be very nervous tonight that we would begin to see large scale cuts to pay for those incentives that are going to go to that plant. That's just the way it works. That's you just have to, you know, be adult about it and understand that when states start giving incentives for businesses, either giving them money or allowing them a lower tax rate to pay less taxes, it has to come somewhere from the rest of the budget. And education is usually the biggest expense for state government. And so they have the biggest budget, therefore, that's where it comes from. And so what's going on is states like North Carolina are experimenting with charter schools because charter schools cost less. You just provide them a few trailers, they don't pay their teachers as much, and off you go. Not really sure about the quality, and if in, you know, states like North Carolina that are looking to go back to a more industrial, blue collar labor type jobs, don't care that kids don't get educated anyway, because we don't need educated kids to stand and run a machine, just to be a low level worker. And so what happens is you kind of match your tax structure in your state and how much money you you put into education with the kind of jobs that you desire. We can tell folks that we want to be 21st century, but in reality, we're funding education and funding corporate America at a level that suggests that we would prefer to return back to just manual labor type jobs, because they cost much less, takes people off the welfare rolls, gives people something to do rather than be out involved in crime, keeps people off the street and busy. And so there is a large consensus across the nation and across North Carolina, across the nation, that we need to have jobs for people. Doesn't matter that the job doesn't pay much and that it's a menial labor type position. That there is value in work, and we need for folks to be working, even if it's not making very much money, and even if it's not a high level job. We need for folks to be working and not be on the street. So that's the direction we've taken in the last 4 years. I don't know what direction we'll take the next 4 years. I have no notion, but it's not debatable that $500 million has been cut out of the state budget over the last 4 years. And so that tells you, we can have politicians tell us that education drives the economic engine of their state and that education is number one, it's a priority. But when $500 million goes away, it's hard to believe them. So the unresolved issues that we're talking about here is who should be educated at public expense. It's not some, we kind of acknowledge that we need to educate everybody, but it's more at what level do we need to educate everybody at public expense. See, we're funding at a level that says that we're not too interested in educating folks too well. We're just trying to keep them in school and not be juvenile delinquents and out of the workforce until they're 18. We're not too interested that they be educated well, because we want to put them in low-skill jobs anyway. To what grade level should free education be provided? We're requiring students to go until they're 16, and then to 18 to get their diploma. I don't hear a lot about trying to cut the age back like I used to. And one of the reasons why is we're trying to keep those young people out of the workforce because there's no jobs for them. So we're trying to keep them in school. If we had a lot of manual labor jobs out there, so therein takes us to the illegal immigrant question. And that's where that comes in. So what folks are saying now is if we'll stop the flow of illegal immigration, there will be a lot more manual labor type jobs for folks, and especially for young people, and we could actually let kids stop going to school sooner, and they could populate those jobs, and we could save a lot of money on public education, and we would have, instead of a kid staying in school till he's 18, we could get him out at 16 or 15 and he could go to work. Now the reason why we don't do that is because there's no jobs for him. And so the notion is if we stopped illegal immigration, we would have jobs for the low-level jobs for these people, and we'd save money on both ends in terms of welfare, food stamps on one end, and paying for education on the other. Will states cut back education programs if revenues diminish? Absolutely. Absolutely. North Carolina has proven that. And North Carolina is not the whipping boy tonight. We're here. North Carolina is doing what most everybody else is doing. And so, yes, as revenues have diminished in states across the country, education, again, being the primary cost factor for state government, yes, that's happened all across the country. Will the states provide adequate funds to sustain their current programs at the desirable optimal levels? No. They have proven that they will not do that. Again, whether we might say that we're training kids to go to college and to be future ready, but we're actually only spending enough to train them at a basic level where they can do a manual labor job. That's not just in North Carolina. Should states continue to increase their share of revenue mix even if the results is loss of local control of education? What that means is shift more responsibility to the state,
No, that will not happen. What's happening is the state is shifting more financial responsibility to the local. And that's why the local is claiming that they should have more control, because the state has cut a $500 million out and has required the local to pick up a lot of that stuff. Is inadequacy of funding a matter of lack of ability to pay, the problems like most to pay, or the demographics of a particular state? It's all three. We do have a lack of ability to pay. Less money is coming in because we have lessened the corporate tax rate. So yes, there is less money coming in. Taxpayers are, their lack of willingness to pay is because they're not making a lot of money. They don't want to be taxed. They don't see the value that education brings to them. And the demographics of the state, that's we all understand that. If you're mostly white and educated, you have or just mostly educated. White, black doesn't seem to matter anymore. Green's what matters, money. It used to be the other way around, but now it's so the demographics of the state, high wealth states tend to pay more. Low wealth states tend to pay less in terms of what they're willing to pay for education. We're just not willing to pay that much.
So is that why North Carolina is 46?
That's why we're a low wealth state, and we don't, and our desire, even back in the 80s and 90s when we were still a low wealth state, we had a desire to pay more. We no longer have that desire. The state wasn't any better off financially in the 80s and 90s when we got to the national average in terms of pay and what we put into public education, because we felt it was a priority. That's why I said there's a big movement to go back now. We don't like the 21st century. It costs too much, and we might have to retrain the workers that we have, so it would be easier to go back to manufacturing jobs. We don't want to. We're not willing to spend the money that we were willing to spend in the late 80s and 90s. We're not willing to spend that anymore. We as a group are not willing to do that. Politicians didn't do this in a vacuum. See, that's one of the things that folks need to understand. It wasn't just our governor and legislature that said, nope, we're going to quit funding it. I mean, they couldn't have done that without support of the populace.
Right.
And so, no, as a state right now, we as a state don't have the political will to spend at the level that we did back in the late 80s and 90s when we got to the national average. And we weren't as well off financially as a state then as we are now. We just don't have the political will to do that. We just don't see the need.
But the manufacturing jobs are gone.
But we want them to come back. Now, you and I probably believe they'll never come back. Not in my lifetime. But folks want them back. They want to return back to a different time. They have nostalgia for a time that never really was. We have a lot of folks who want, who want to go back in time, turn the clock back because they think times were better. I lived through a lot of those times. Trust me, they weren't better. If you got some time, there's a mini series that comes on, and I'm sorry, I don't know what channel it's on. I think it might be the History Channel or one of those channels, and it's documentaries about the decades. Go back and look at the one on the 70s and see all the riots, all the assassinations, all the gas lines, no gas costing more than you made, all of the political and social turmoil and deaths and crime rates and cities being burned down. Go back and look at all that stuff and tell me that's what you want to go back to again. Tell me you want to go back to having school kids crawl up under their desks because the threat of nuclear war is imminent in the 60s. Tell me you want to go back to the 50s where separate was unequal. Well, how far back do we want to go? Tell me a time in my lifetime. Tell me a time when things were better than they are now. But for some reason, folks have this nostalgia, especially folks who weren't old enough to have remembered those times or lived them. They have nostalgia for a time that was never really there. Why do you think, certain TV shows that show that time in a very romantic way are so popular? But those times never really, they weren't that good. Trust me, they were not that good. I mean, when you have to go every Sunday afternoon over to the local, over to a church in your community, might not have been your church, but a church in your community, or a post office, or a school in your community on Sunday afternoon, every Sunday afternoon when you're a kid, and swallow a sugar cube. Tell me how things are better. People say, Dale, what in the world are you talking about? I was getting my polio vaccine. That's the way we used to get it. On Sunday afternoon, every Sunday afternoon when I was a kid, they had a place designated in your community where you went and got your polio vaccine. They put a drop of it on a sugar cube when I was a kid. Tell me again how people don't even know what polio is now. I had friends and relatives who got polio.
Wow.
So tell me how things were better back then. I haven't seen anybody lately taking a polio sugar cube. There were things back then. You guys, a child, if you got it, it killed you. We don't. We're living as a standard of living in this country now better than we ever have in terms of social issues and other things. It's just, we have progressed, but for some reason folks believe we've gone too far, and schools are suffering because of that, because they see schools as being a vehicle of social change and integration, and they don't like that. And schools promoting 21st century concepts and ideals and communication and technology, they don't like that. They want jobs they want manufacturing and low level jobs, coal mines, and all those. They want those things to come back. They want to make sure that we don't let the immigrants in to take those jobs, so that the folks can have them. But I'm afraid that I'm not sure how many folks are going to take those jobs. Maybe they will if they don't have any other options.
So they're too low paying, or?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, and so I just don't understand this nostalgia for a time that never was. But all of this is not just a political rant. This all greatly influences financing of education. Why spend a lot of money on something that's not needed? A lot of these kids are not going to go to college. A lot of these kids don't need a high school diploma to work in the mine or the mill. Why should we spend all this money on public education? Well, biggest reason right now is, as Luke said, the jobs aren't there. Oh, we're going to bring the jobs back. Well, if we started today, it'd take 40 years to bring the jobs back. If we started today, that's why I said it's not going to happen in my lifetime, unless I live, into the next century. I mean, it's not going to happen in my lifetime that we're going to bring. But what we're desirous to do right now is fund education at the level that of an industrial society, when we don't have that right now, and that therein lies our problem. If we had all these jobs, it would be one thing to be funding education at this level, but we don't have the jobs. Oh, they're going to come back. Somebody thinks that we can wave a wand and these jobs will come back. They might trickle back a few at a time, but it will take decades for them to come back in any large measure. And so our conflict as school administrators is going to continue to be trying to educate a populace for the modern world with funding from ancient times. There lies your conflict. We're going to be funded like the 1950s, but we've got to put kids out, in the teens here. Those jobs aren't there. If our graduates, if they're going to get a job, it's going to have to be at a high tech level, but we're only funding education to educate them at a manual level, labor level. Therein lies your conflict. That's it in a nutshell right there.
Wow.
Therein lies your problem. And so what that means is we as school administrators have got to figure out how to do more with less. We've got to be data driven. We've got to empower teachers to find ways to teach kids, in their classroom without all the bells and whistles and extra frills and extra time and money and all the things that it actually takes to educate kids the way that they need to be educated. We've got to do more with less. The way you do that is by empowering teachers. You'll learn that next semester in 604. This is kind of the transitional lecture to next semester. Next semester is about models of teaching, instructional delivery. It's not about so much about curriculum is content and process. The content has already been decided for us, Common Core or some variation thereof or standard course of study. What our job as school administrators is process, the delivery of education, using Marzano's 9 high yield strategies, differentiating instruction, using PLCs to empower teachers to develop great models of teaching. That's what you'll learn next semester in 604. That's what we have to do now. We have to find a way to do a better job with what we've got, and how to get teachers who are willing and make them able through a staff development program that you learned in the APTEL when you did it, which is basically empowering teachers and training them in the high yield strategies. So you're not going to have extra people. You're not going to have coaches and teacher assistants, and you're not going to have small classes, and you're not going to have plenty of money for supplies and labs and all those kinds. You're going to have to figure out, your teachers are going to have to be very self-reliant, and you're going to have to empower them to do that. And so that's what you're going to do in 604, is you're going to learn all those models of how to develop models of teaching and empower your teachers, because that's the only way you're going to survive. You're not going to get the funding and the support that you need to be successful schools. And especially as we continue to resegregate schools, not so much by race, but by wealth. We continue to resegregate into poor schools and wealthy schools. And if you're at one of those poor schools, you're not going to have the PTA and other resources to draw upon. You're going to have to figure out how to do it on your own.
So are the poor schools and rich schools, as far as grading wise, how does that work?
Well,
some of the rich schools don't have that high standards either.
Well, what we're trying to move to is a growth model. You know that, where we assess schools on whether their kids make a year's growth, not where they are absolutely. Comparative accountability only works if you're at the wealthy schools. It's not equitable for anybody else. You're comparing apples to oranges, and we've done that for over 20 years in North Carolina. The only equitable assessment system is a growth model. How many of your kids in your classroom or in your school make a year's growth? And that starts with where they are and when you get them, and where they're at when you get through with them that year. Comparative accountability, like in the old days, just compared them against everybody else. It didn't matter that they were 2 grade levels behind when you got them. When you got through with them, you moved them up a whole grade level or a grade level and a half. You still were, below grade level. Oh, that's, you failed. No, we're going to have to continue to fight as professionals in the field. We're going to have to continue to fight for growth model accountability, where what we did with the kid is what matters, not where he was or when we got him. And right now, in comparative accountability, you're judged on who you get, not what you do with them. And one of the things that we see from charter schools is they do a worse job than public schools with kids who are above grade level. A lot of them won't take kids unless they're on grade level, and the longer they stay there, the dumber they get. Private schools are the same way. Private schools and charter schools, by and large, are just about who's not there. The quality of instruction in both of them are poorer than public schools. But they get kids who come from good families and good homes and who naturally score well, regardless of whether they're taught well or not. Most of the time, they just teach themselves. And so one of the things the growth model is showing, and one of the reasons why privates and charters don't like it is they don't grow their kids. They just get smart kids and warehouse them. And so as we continue to push for charters and privates through public school vouchers, giving parents money to send them there, one of the things that those folks are going to see is their kids are basically just warehoused in those places. We're not requiring them, I set up a charter school and my entrance requirement is you got to be on grade level. Well, all I've got to do is, just coast along. But those kids need to be taught and they need to grow also. The growth model shows that a lot of those kids don't grow any, they just pretty much warehouse them. But we keep the undesirables out, the poor kids. That's what's going on. I think at some point too that we're going to see a backlash from folks in terms of if we go to vouchers, private school vouchers, where public funds pay for vouchers to take kids to private schools and paid for by public funds. I think we're going to see a backlash from public schools and from private schools. And one of the things that private schools are already doing is they're increasing the cost to a level where a voucher won't make any difference. You still won't be able to, poor people still that get the voucher won't be able to go to the private school anyway because it costs too much. Kids in my neighborhood at the lake house, they go to Davidson Day there at Lake Norman. Davidson Day costs $18,000 a year. Vouchers $3,700 a year. If you were a parent, you'd still have to come up with, over $14,000 a year to send your kid there, even if you got a private school voucher.
Is this a high school?
Yeah, it's actually kindergarten through high school.
Wow.
And they charge, Charlotte Latin, Charlotte Country Day, Catholic, they're all in the same price range. They're all between $15,000 and $20,000 a year.
Wow.
And what that does is means that they have an exclusive clientele. And those kids, the scores come walking in the front door every day. Now they don't grow, but they can pass the test whether you teach them or not, because they come from that background. So in the future, school finance in the future will continue to be affected by economic conditions, inflation, deflation, taxation, policies, legislation, philosophies, and court action. Court action being vouchers. New laws that are enacted will continue to bring greater equity to the financing, but also greater equity and fairness to taxpayers who pay the cost. I don't know that I agree with that statement. That new laws will continue to bring greater equity. I don't believe that at all. I'm afraid that many of the new laws that we get into, that's their intention. Let me be clear. That's their intention. But folks always find the back door, I'm afraid. I think a lot of the laws that are enacted are, just like vouchers. The idea is to bring greater equity, to allow poor kids to go to a private school. But the problem is, on the other end, the private schools don't want them, and so they've increased the cost where the vouchers don't matter. There's always, So I agree with that the intent of new laws will be to try to bring greater equity and excellence. But I'm afraid with fairness to the taxpayers. I believe that is their intent, but I don't think it's going to have that big an impact. Folks always have a way to figure out a way to not play along. And so private schools right now, the elite ones that don't want poor people, they've just increased the cost to ridiculous levels to keep them out, so that even if they do get a voucher, they can't come there anyway. So I'm not that optimistic that new laws are going to these new laws are basically charter schools and private schools. And what we find out, or private school vouchers, and what we find out about charter schools is that they have a lot more problems than public schools do. The one here in the county where I'm sitting right now is under investigation by the SBI and the federal government for basically racketeering. So you can read about them in the paper. So I know that the intention, the law to create charter schools intended to make things, to bring equity and excellence and help the financing of education. But what's happened is a lot of folks have taken the money and run. Luke's sitting in Charlotte right now. How many charter schools have closed in Charlotte over the last 5 years because all the funds disappeared?
A lot.
So kids showed up for school one day and the door was locked.
A lot.
I can remember at least 6, can't you?
Yep.
And probably if you went back and did an Eric search, we'd probably find more than that.
Oh yeah.
But I know some people involved in 2 of them. One of them was one of my former students. That's correct. One of my former doctoral students was involved in one that closed the doors.
Wow.
So I don't think he was one of the ones taking the money, but the money got gone and they had to close the doors. So I know that I understand that the intention of the laws on charter schools and private school vouchers. I agree that their intent is to bring greater equity and excellence. But in reality, what has caught, and fairness, giving poor kids a shot that they wouldn't normally have. But in reality, it's not working out that way so far. And that's unfortunate. I would be the biggest voucher and charter school proponent in the world. I believe that, in having anything that helps a kid and gives them an opportunity. But unfortunately, right now, there is so much abuse on both of those that I'm just not sure of their value. I am sure that there's a lot of bad things happening with both of those, to the point where I believe there should be a moratorium until we get some things figured out and get some better control over those entities. We still need to exercise some kind of fiscal control over them. We don't need schools going out of business 2 weeks into the school year. We don't need what's going on right now. We don't need schools just warehousing kids to keep them away from undesirable poor kids and them not learning anything. And that's going on too in a large measure. All right. I have one more. PowerPoint for you tonight. And again, it speaks to equity or disparity, again, in the funding. It's kind of it's a very long one. I wouldn't dare go through all of this. This one kind of covers all of the things that I've kind of talked about tonight and some, and more. And it gets into Common Core, national standard, Common Core, national standards. It gets into pretty much all of the political questions about financing education. This is one of those for your toolbox kind of thing. It's about 60 slides long. It's a long one, but it has everything in it. I always try to give you something every week. So if you don't save anything else, on financing from this course, this is the one right here. Financing education. This is the one that you need to save and have this one, because it enters into all the arguments about Common Core, which is national standards, financing, low wealth, high wealth, all charters about it everything. My rant tonight was on the things that I think are most urgent. It would take me the whole semester to cover all the topics in this thing. So this is one you want to download and keep, and you can refer to this one. This one kind of summarizes about 4 textbooks worth of material, and it's not that long to read. It might take you an hour to work through it, but it's like every good textbook on financing and education and all the modern thought is in this one PowerPoint. So if you get an hour's time but you don't have anything else to do, this is a good one. And it kind of hits on all the topics plus more that I covered tonight. All right. All right. Share screen, Zoom session 12. Go back here. All right. I wanted to point out that on our page tonight under Zoom session 12, there is a link to the Mels 603 wiki that some of us have set up. And it looks like this when you click on that link, and we have all the chapters PowerPointed for you. So if you in your financing in your resources and finance book, that's what these are. We took the time to go through and kind of do a Dale's Notes PowerPoint on these. You can go through and read these. So if you've got a whole chapter in a book and you say, "Gosh, I don't know what's important," we've kind of done that for you. Put facility plans and some other things in here, equity framework, the ones that I've gone over tonight. But this is a really good one right here. We've also got some wikis over here for the other classes. I don't know if y'all have been seeing those where we kind of do the same thing. So if we went to the 602 wiki, let's see if that'll work. We've done the same thing where we've kind of highlighted the books for you. I don't know if anybody has shown you this before. You can see right here where we highlighted the books in PowerPoints to make it simple for you, and kind of a Cliff's Notes version of the books. But that link will take you to the wikis. That's a valuable one for you to have. All right, and that one is right here under week 12. If you want that link to this class's wiki and wiki page and the other Mels class wiki pages, they're under there. All right. Again, make sure that you set up your competency folio page and task stream and start putting those competency proofs in there. Make sure that you do that. At this time of the semester, if you, my suggestion to one of our classmates tonight by email, and my suggestion to everybody when it gets to be this time of the semester, I would concentrate on my evidence artifact work for the rest of the semester. Whatever you've done in terms of your weekly assignments, if you can get to them, fine. If you can't, that's, but you need to work on your evidence artifacts and try not to go to 604 behind. So if you only have a certain amount of time, spend it on your evidence artifact work, and I'll understand. Okay. Luke, any questions tonight? I appreciate you joining me.
Sure.
Enjoy it.
Always.
All right. I'll see everybody next week. Everybody have a good week.